Unspoken Issues.
It is time, ladies and gentlemen. The Unspoken Issues podcast has come back. And this evening, it's Avengers #1. But which Avengers #1 is it? That's a good question. Chris, you had the choice here. You displayed the choices for our Unspoken Decade fans there on the Facebook page, and why don't you let them know the poll choices that they had, what they chose. I've got the results here if you need it, but let them know what went the thought process into this and what you did there.
I was keeping it simple. We haven't talked about the Avengers on Unspoken Issues yet, I don't believe. In the early part of the 90s, the Avengers were like strictly the B team, behind the X-Men and maybe even behind the Fantastic Four. Like they weren't as all that popular for Marvel. But there came a day when the Avengers got caught up in a little extra hype with Heroes Reborn, the Liefeld and Lee taking over Avengers, Captain America FF, and Iron Man. And that went on for a while, and then they brought the Avengers and the other characters back to the main Marvel 616 universe. Kind of brought them back with a bang with Heroes Return. So I wanted to do Avengers #1 and give people a choice between the Heroes Reborn Avengers #1, which I believe is the first Avengers #1 since the 60s. Like now we've had what? I'll bet we've had 8 or 10 Avengers
wouldn't surprise me.
Not counting miniseries, like just, restarting the regular series.
Yeah.
But I believe the Liefeld Heroes Reborn version was the first Avengers #1 since 1963 or whatever. And then we had going up against it the Heroes Return Avengers #1 with Kurt Busiek and George Perez. And two completely different styles of comic book. Liefeld's Avengers is kind of like an adrenaline-fueled one-night stand jackhammer, whereas Busiek and Perez is more like a sweet, tender honeymoon marathon. And they're both great, but they're really different. So I put the poll out there, and it was not competitive.
No, it was not. Man, oh man, it was a landslide. So, Heroes Reborn. Now, it had some votes. Heroes Reborn got 52 votes. 52. The only problem is that there was a total of 173 votes. And 121 of those went to Heroes Return. So, man, Kurt Busiek, George Perez. I mean, these guys are two big names that coming together, it's like peanut butter and jelly sometimes. I mean, you're going to get something good. And I mean, you mentioned it. The Avengers were kind of not on the top of a whole lot of people's lists, especially in the 90s going into this era.
It seems weird thinking now when, the whole world is Avengers crazy, basically. Thanks to the film franchise that, the Avengers was the third string superhero team, basically, as far as popularity, not in how they rank in universe. Most people would have always, Joe Schmo on the street and the Marvel 616 would always think Avengers are like the main superheroes. But like, as far as like popularity for fans, they were like probably a distant third throughout.
Yeah. I wasn't picking any Avengers books up in the 90s. Maybe if it was entailed like a crossover. I can't remember if Blood Ties was happening in the 90s, which I think it was.
Yeah.
It was rare that I was picking up Avengers books. I was more the mutant guy picking up the X books at that point in time. Me and you have talked a lot about this era. We talked about a lot of the things that was leading up to this. I'm trying to think of the one that we did on Source Material podcast where
Onslaught?
Was it Blood Ties that we did? Where
we did do a Blood Ties one, yeah.
Okay, so we did Blood Ties.
Avengers crossover, yeah.
Okay, so we did Blood Ties, and I believe that's occurring before Heroes.
Yeah, that was a good 3 or 4 years before Heroes Reborn.
Okay, then we did.
Like 93.
Yep, and then we did Onslaught. We talked about Onslaught. So to kind of recap, we had a big universe. Well, I'd say a Marvel universe shattering event here, where a entity by the name of Onslaught. I won't give away the twist, but an entity called Onslaught attacks the Marvel Universe. By the end of that event, Onslaught has been beaten. However, a bunch of the Marvel heroes go away in that battle. They disappear. And that's what leads into Heroes Reborn. Those that disappeared end up in what they call, I think, now this is all from the wiki, they call it the Franklin verse, which I never called it that. I mean, I knew it as a pocket universe, and Franklin Richards like Bouncy Ball or whatever he had there. So the Heroes Reborn universe featured members of the Avengers. I think the Incredible Hulk was in there. We had the Fantastic Four. We had, I'm trying to think of who else was in.
Some of the Inhumans.
Yep, some of the Inhumans were in there. So during Heroes Reborn, it's kind of like a reset reality where our favorite image creators, Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld, have come back over to the Marvel after they're, they say, okay, they let bygones be bygones. We'll definitely help you guys out. So they're writing and penciling these things. And what was the other one? Oh, yeah. So it was the Avengers and Captain America. So this is from the wiki. However, after 6 issues, Marvel ended Liefeld's contract early, citing low sales on his 2 titles. Liefeld's titles were assigned to Lee. Walt Simonson took over on Avengers when it moved to Wildstorm. Yes, Wildstorm. The end of this, I'm going to read this sentence because at some point, Chris, you are invited on. We have to do this at some point. It says, although the 4 titles in Heroes Reborn were slated for a 12-issue run, James Robinson wrote a 13th and final issue for each book. The storyline entitled World War III was a crossover between the Marvel and Wildstorm characters. So we have to do that at some point. That's got to happen.
Have you never read those?
I have 2 of them.
Okay.
I just never had a chance. There's one of them I can't find for some reason. And a lot of, and we may have talked about it on this podcast, I don't know, but I know I've heard it on other podcasts. It's when you look at like the trades and stuff, that's not collected.
Right.
They don't collect those 13th
issues. They can, I'm sure, because Wildstorm is DC now.
That's right. So I remember the covers for those things. Death Blows on the freaking cover, Maul as part of the Fantastic Four, and you're just like, oh my gosh, this is. I own, I think, 2 of them, but I don't have the whole thing, so I've never read all 4 of them.
I was a Heroes Reborn collector on all the titles early on. I jumped ship on Avengers and Captain America whenever Liefeld broke off of those, and I didn't get FF or Iron Man past maybe the 4th or 5th issues of those. I probably got FF until Lee stopped penciling. I can't really remember the details as far as that goes, but I did jump back in for World War III, and before that, issue 12 was the last. Was initially going to be the last issue of each Heroes Reborn series, and it was a crossover where they were fighting Galactus.
Oh.
And it was pretty cool. So I had those 4, and then I got the World War III crossover, and I read both of those like crossovers several times. When I was younger.
Oh,
they
man,
were really cool. I haven't read them in years. I don't know how well they hold up, but I know that Mike Ringo did the art on one of the issues, and Ron Lim was the artist on one of the Galactus crossover issues. So I remember there was some good art in there, but I don't remember much else about it.
So it says that the changes to the characters were controversial, provoking debates amongst fans. The change in creative team on Captain America was also controversial since the pre-Heroes Reborn team of Mark Waid and Ron Garney had already been bringing in increased sales and critical acclaim to the series. However, all the titles experienced a large upsurge in sales. According to Lee, Marvel proposed continuing the Heroes Reborn lineup indefinitely under the condition that Lee would draw at least one of them, and he refused.
I'd never known that. I read that on Wikipedia too, but I'd never known that. That's kind of cool. Interesting.
Yeah. At the end of the storyline, the Fantastic Four and Avengers were returned to the mainstream universe. Now, this is where we're going to pick up with Heroes Return, again through the intervention of Franklin Richards. Now, there was some interesting...
One more note on Avengers Heroes Reborn, number 1. As Rob Liefeld is quick to point out in any conversation about Avengers, that is still the highest selling issue of Avengers ever printed.
Is it really?
And which is kind of remarkable considering it came out at a point when the industry was in a real downturn.
96, right?
Yeah, it was after the industry had kind of collapsed. So even when when comics were kind of at their peak in the early 90s and Avengers was putting out, special foil covers and stuff, that Rob Liefeld issue is still the highest selling Avengers issue of all time.
Yeah.
But
I imagine he holds a couple of those records with Marvel, actually.
Well, X-Force was number 1 at one time. I believe it got surpassed by X-Men a few months later.
Right after that, yeah.
Is X-Men still the highest selling comic?
Oh, we were just looking at this. I know we were high.
And I think it might be Adventures 500, but I don't know if that counts considering I think there's a lot of issues with the data because, like, you can only look up what the publishers sell to the stores and not what the stores are actually, what their sales actually are.
You can't.
And we know that there were thousands of unsold copies of Adventures 500 left after that came out. So,
Yeah, okay, so this is the way it went. They have Spider-Man at number 5. Now, this is including DC and Marvel. But it has Spider-Man at number 5 with 2.5 million copies. Coming in at number 2, X-Force number 1, 5 million copies. And then X-Men number 1 with 7.1 million copies.
What were 3 and 4?
Those were, now, again, we're going to DC here. Superman number 75 coming in at number 4 with 3 million copies. And then Adventures of Superman number 500. Obviously, black bag, white bag.
Right.
4.2 million copies there, number 3.
Eventually, we're going to have to do that X-Men 1 versus Superman 75.
Oh, yes, dude. Absolutely. So they have, so on this, this is from Zap Kapow Comics. There are 10 issues on this list. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are Superman Death of and Return related. It's like Superman, the Man of Steel, number 22, Adventures of Superman 501, Superman 78, and Superman in Action Comics 687. Those are the other 4. Number 10 is an Image comic. Can you try and guess what that is?
I would say it's got to be Spawn number 1 or Youngblood number 1. Probably Spawn.
Spawn number 1. That is right. Number 10 with 1.7 million copies. All right.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Heroes return. So, again, where the heroes come back, and I mean, we can jump into what happens with Avengers, but there's some stuff here that was pretty interesting that I thought was pretty cool. I'm trying to find. Now, there was a 4-issue limited series came out December of '97, which I think is the exact same time that this is running. Well, this was on sale date December 17th, 1997. Cover date's '98 though. But
I believe Heroes Return was a 4-issue weekly series.
Okay.
And then as soon as the 4th issue came out, I think the next week the Heroes Return book started coming out. I don't remember what order they came out in.
I think I have Heroes Return in trade, but I don't know if I remember reading this because I think I would recognize this plot. The Celestials take notice of Franklin's pocket universe and initially demand that he now eliminate one of the 2 universes, but finally relented on the condition that all beings native to Earth 616 evacuate the pocket universe and never return. So our heroes that left come back, but that universe still goes on. That's interesting because I'm a big fan of, and I think me and you may have even talked about this, but I'm a big fan of The Exiles. The Exiles did a series called World Tour. World Tour was what it was called.
Where they went to all the different universes,
They hop into the Heroes Reborn universe, and of course, Bucky's still there, the female Bucky, and there's all sorts of remnants from that universe that are still there trying to actually continue to live, but things have went really downhill, if I remember right. Let's go ahead and get into the synopsis real quick because this issue is jam packed, and I know we have a lot to talk about. All right, so everything has somewhat come back to normal, except there's one hero that has not returned that went missing initially after the battle with Onslaught, and that's Thor. Nobody's seen Thor for a while. The way this book starts off is we have present and past Avengers are being attacked, and I tried to write them all down here. So if you hop in with whatever, tell me to stop, and we'll talk about whatever here. But like I said, I mean, there's a lot going on. We start out with Scarlet Witch, Crystal, Luna, and Quicksilver. Luna is the daughter of Crystal and Quicksilver, right?
Right.
So they're being attacked by the flying trolls of Thryhem.
Sure.
So, right. And initially, we have, you could tell that these have to be some Asgardians or something because just by the way that the text is written.
Right.
They have that old speak. So Firebird is getting attacked by some ground monsters. Black Panther's over in Wakanda. Can't remember what he's going up against. Hawkeye versus some dude named Mutaurus, which he cracks a few jokes about that. Magdalene and the Swordsman versus some flesh-eating plants. Hercules, who's hanging out in Cincinnati, he's going up against some dragon thing. The Living Lightning.
Terrible 90s costume.
Oh,
I mean,
yes.
Every Hercules costume is kind of terrible, but
yeah, he definitely looks different than the Hercules that I'm used to. He has no beard. The thing is that he shaves his beard off, but every panel has him with 5 o'clock shadow. So, okay, Hercules versus some dragon thing in Cincinnati, the living lightning versus some troll looking things. And here's the thing. If I was a Thor guy, if I was a guy that read Thor instead of Punisher when I was, reading comics, these probably all have names that I have no idea about. So I'm just going to go ahead and put that out there. They are probably known very well in the Asgardian universe. All right, Moondragon versus Gullen, the Boar God. Spider-Woman versus the Vanna, which are like these fairy-like creatures. Namor is going up against some kind of blue giant. He looked familiar, but I don't know. They didn't say his name in the panel, so I have no idea.
Right. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay. She-Hulk was going up against some people called the Demon Riders. And your boy...
Oh, the man.
Yeah, Darkhawk. He's they didn't name the opponents he was going against.
He would have no clue.
Yeah. Looked like trolls or something.
Some kind of random troglodytes, I don't know. Yeah.
Okay. Justice, Rage, and Firestar versus some more trolls. And as quickly as the fight begins, their opponents disappear. So we're basically treated to I don't know, what is it, 2 or 3 pages of just heroes getting attacked by all these...
Yeah, if not counting the one panel where Quicksilver and those people are attacked, there's 4 pages of just, different Avengers fighting off these otherworldly creatures.
Mm-hmm. I'll break right there real quick before we get into anything next. I mean, was there anything that stuck out to you there in those panels where our heroes are fighting off these surprise villainous attackers?
Just the greatness of George Perez.
Oh, yeah.
Which I believe Perez is probably the proper pronunciation, but I'm not changing now. I'm almost 40 years old. So, but yeah, and Darkhawk being in there was great. All these are creatures, I believe, that you probably can look into Thor's, history and other of the Marvel pantheon of gods have probably, all these characters have probably showed up in different places.
Yeah.
Because Kurt Busiek, he was actually, this is probably I guess Marvel's was the thing that really put him into the upper stratosphere of writers, and then Astro City. But this Avengers run is pretty highly regarded among his work, and he's really good at we read Avengers Forever, obviously, for source material, and he respects the history of the Marvel universe, and likes to bring that stuff back in when he can. Yeah,
one of the things that I know about George's work, that guy can draw he
loves putting in as much detail as possible.
I know. It doesn't surprise me what we're going to get here in a few, which is basically a 2-page spread or big, just swath of characters. And you're not going to have any problem to figure out who's who because he can do it. And that has got to be some of the most aggravating, detailed work, but he does it so well.
Right. And writers will talk about how they send him, especially I've seen where Busiek has talked about, he'll send him the scripts and he won't ask for a whole lot, and then he'll get the pages back and it'll just be this insane, full page spread, and it's just with all these details that weren't included in the script that he's just added in. Because Perez is a writer as well, so
yeah,
he's amazing. He's definitely top 3 or 4 for me, and as far as comic book artists.
Yeah. So back at Avengers Mansion, the team's trying to figure out what to do about these attacks. Now, like I said, at the time, Thor has not returned yet, but hey, there's a window over there, and sure enough, the Thunder God crashes right through it. Now he comes in. Of course, he looks like he's just been beat to hell. He's wore out, and he's telling the team that the world is in danger. And I guess it's important to note that when we say team, we're talking about some of the original founding. Well, I should say there's some original founding members in there. We're not going to count Cap because I know the Avengers were around before that. But we got Captain America, Iron Man, Giant Man, and the Wasp. And they all agree, obviously, after talking to Thor, who clearly got the point across that Midgard is in trouble. They're all in it to help. So now we get the rally cry, Avengers Assemble, and boy, do they ever. 2-page spread of all the Avengers in the mansion. And I'm bringing it up right now because we have to just kind of take a look at everybody that's in there. I know there's some in there that I have no idea about. Obviously, I think everybody that got attacked is probably there.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, okay, I'm pointing this out right now. Carol Danvers.
Yes.
Okay. I wasn't reading anything that I can remember in the 90s that had her in it, obviously, because I would remember that look. Now, I know somebody asked her about being binary at this point.
Right.
She is Carol, right?
That is Carol Danvers, yes.
Okay.
I don't think I'd read anything with her as binary except for these early Avengers issues. She would join the team after this first adventure was over with when they pared it down to their main roster. And she started going by Warbird, which is what I really knew her as for years until she became Miss Marvel again in like the mid 2000s and now Captain Marvel. But yeah, that was her and her binary look. I don't really know much about this era as far as her history and stuff like that, but basically she could turn on her binary powers and that's how she looked when she had them activated, and then I guess she could switch back to looking like she normally does.
Okay. So Spider-Man's in the picture, top right. Below that is a guy with a white helmet, triangle visor, and a green stripe.
Yeah, that's Rage of the New Warriors. That is his second costume. He started out obviously in like the leather vest, no shirt, and he had a like a face mask, almost like a ski mask.
Looked like I remember that. And
then later in the New Warriors series, he got this bad costume that they're both bad, but he got this other costume.
Okay. How about the dude with if we go by the Black Knight, there's a guy there with like a red suit, and he has, really, if you laid that out flat, it'd look like a dang shovel for a face. But...
Yeah. I want to say he is called Ray or the Ray or maybe Stingray.
Okay.
I don't know anything about that character other than I recognize him.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm not sure what his character name is. I think it's Stingray. I'm not certain though.
Everybody else I kind of recognize. I recognize, oh goodness, Star Fox there in the middle. Okay. So we got Star Fox there.
Cersei's there.
Yep.
Sandman.
Rick Jones is going around in a wheelchair
style chair, hover chair. Yeah.
Yep. See, is it Tigra there?
Tigra, I guess. Yeah. Building Lightning, we knew him. You see D-Man in the back there with Moondragon.
Oh boy, D-Man, he comes up here later. Oh, D-Man. Meanwhile, as the present and past Avengers are kind of hanging out, waiting to see what in the world they got called in for, Captain America, I think, and Janet are on the phone with the Hulk, who he does not want to be bothered. I don't know what's going on with him after the events of Heroes Return, but I know prior to Heroes Reborn, he gets like separated from his body.
Right. Yeah. After in the midst of the Onslaught battle, Hulk and Banner are separated, and so Banner like wakes up and he sees the Hulk, laying there unconscious, and he kind of stumbles into the void with all the other characters that were shunted into that other universe. So there were basically two Hulks. There was a Hulk in Heroes Reborn universe, and then I guess the one that stayed here was sort of a more mindless version. I wasn't reading Hulk. The only time I read Hulk in that era was when the Thunderbolts had their first appearance.
Okay.
Which didn't give me any insight into what was going on with the stuff.
Obviously, he's got his own thing going on.
Yeah, and I don't know how that was resolved when they came back either. I have no idea.
Fantastic Four, they can't make it. They say they're doing their own thing. Okay, that's fine.
I do want to shout out the cool look of like Iron Man's redesigned armor from Heroes Return era, which is one of my favorite Iron Man armors. And they're using this computer coloring to give it the lights shining out from these vents. It's something that I don't know if they really kept up with, like as the series progressed even with Iron Man series, which I think Busiek was also writing. But it's a really cool and unique look in a few panels here. I think it looks cool.
So Captain America addresses the masses here, the masses of the Avengers in some type of like auditorium, and poor D-Man who's sitting in the middle.
I'm just going to go ahead and call it. This is my panel of the issue.
Oh, is it right here? Poor D-Man sitting in the middle, and everybody is like sitting 3 seats. Oh, wait a second. They're practicing social distancing. Exactly. Now we find out later on in the issue about D-Man and his troubles. I've known D-Man as a character. Like I knew he existed, but I didn't know what he did. The only time I actually remember seeing him was on the cover of an official handbook of the Marvel Universe.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so he's on the front, and he looks like Wolverine.
Yeah, his costume, like, I don't know a whole lot about him. I only really know D-Man from this Heroes Return story arc.
Uh-huh.
At the end of it, he goes back to his own thing, and I think he's popped up a few times here and there, but I'm not that familiar with him. But I looked up some stuff about him, and his costume is literally just Daredevil's yellow and black costume, his original costume, with a Wolverine mask.
That's right.
I looked into it a little bit, and he was first appearing in the mid 80s, and he was like in the wrestling in the Thing solo series. Or any of those?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Basically, the 80s there was a Thing solo series where he was like a professional wrestler fighting other superpowered characters, and D-Man was in that wrestling circuit.
Dennis Dunphy, also known as Demolition Man, and of course, D-Man. Yes, better known as D-Man. That's how I knew him, but I certainly didn't know him as Demolition Man. But so he's run into some trouble, and it's funny because I think Cap brings him in, and I assume he was obviously a member of the Avengers at one point. Well, maybe, I don't know.
I think so. I mean, everybody, with the exception of Firestar and Justice, who tag along with Rage, all of these are supposed to be former Avengers characters that have been on the team at some point or another. Because Busiek said when he did this relaunch, he wanted to bring in every former Avenger to appear. And, a few people only appear in the Hulk and the Fantastic Four only appear in monitors, and Spider-Man appears here and then he's out. Apparently every Avenger up to this point appears in this issue.
Well, Dennis Dunphy has fallen on some hard times, and Captain America's, I assume, either brought him in from the street.
He's part of some homeless community at this point where they're living underground. I don't know any details about it really, but that's why he smells terrible.
Yeah, and nobody, that is a recurring joke throughout the whole issue. If D-Man's in a panel, somebody is commenting or staring at him, and they're upset with the fact that he stinks. Poor D-Man. So Cap's addressing them all, and just before everything gets started, sure enough, Spider-Man deuces out. He's like, guys, it's funny because he says, I'm kind of up to my neck in what feels like 5 different things at once, which if this is 98, I think he has 5. I know he definitely has 4 on the shelf.
Yeah, I'm sure that's what that is a reference to, is that he's got 4 regular series, and I guess the 5th would be the Spider-Man Unlimited quarterly series.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was starting to think, well, Marvel Tales, but that's all stuff that happened in the past for him. So, yeah, there's probably Spider-Man Unlimited going on. Okay, so Spider-Man leaves. Now it's Thor. Thor takes the podium, and he tells a story now. He talks about what happens in the moments leading up to the end of Heroes Reborn, where he's locked, and this might be happening in, I think this happens in Heroes Reborn. It's either Heroes Reborn or Heroes Return.
In the Heroes Return. Heroes Reborn, The Return, I guess, is the name of that miniseries.
Oh, that's not confusing. Okay. So he's locked in battle with Doctor Doom, and he pretty much assumes he's going to die, and he's like, this is fine with me. If I get to battle you for eternity, I'm perfectly fine with it. He's trying to rescue, I think, Franklin, and Doom's trying to use, of course, as Doom does, he's trying to use Franklin Richards' power somehow. So Thor's like, no, I say thee nay, and they continue to battle. And then the next thing you know, he's just, he awakens in a trashed Asgard. It's just completely desolate. It looks like it's been destroyed. So he's searching everywhere, high and low, trying to find somebody, anybody. And he ends up finding a part where the Rainbow Bridge had busted. So clearly there was a large battle that had happened. Going through, he finds that a very deadly and powerful weapon is missing as well. It's called the Twilight Sword. And I quoted it here. It was forged to raise all that is when the end of time is nigh, and wielded by one of right power, it can destroy creation or remake it. That's where the whole, holy crap, Midgard's in trouble. This thing is missing. He also mentions that there's something called the 5 Norn Stones. Mm-hmm. It's starting to sound a little bit familiar. The 5 Norn Stones are at Earth as well, but they're scattered in different places. So they need to find them. So the plan's this. They split into 5 teams, each heading to where the stones may be. There is a random Moon Knight appearance.
Yeah. I mean, he was a West Coast Avenger, so they had to get him in there.
Okay. All right. So he's there. Moon Knight watches as the planes go over. They split to take off to try and find the Norn Stones. Go ahead, man.
Let me interject real quick to a panel. During the Thor retelling of what's been going on, there's a moment with Iron Man and Thor that'll get called back later, where Iron Man basically turns to Iron Man and Captain America.
Oh, yes.
Okay. And Iron Man turns to Cap and basically says, this story gives me the creeps. And Cap is like, well, you've dealt with magic before. And Tony's basically says, I can handle magic. I don't like it, but ultimately it's just a science I don't understand. But mythology and gods, this kind of thing violates everything I've ever believed in, which is a really cool insight into Iron Man's perspective. And it, like I said, we'll call back to that at the very end of the issue.
Yeah, I would probably classify Tony Stark as somebody who likes to be in control.
Yeah.
And when elements are really outside of his control, he's not going to dig that at all.
Yeah, it's something he can't wrap his head around. Especially.
Yeah, this is stuff that he just doesn't understand.
Yeah, it's above him.
Mm-hmm. Captain America's shuttle. So I'm trying to figure out who all was in this. We obviously got we got D-Man. We have Hercules. Looks like Crystal's in there. Quicksilver. Quasar. Quasar's on the outside. Captain America. Scarlet Witch.
Yep.
I think that's everybody. So their shuttles. I don't know if what's going on. I think it's getting attacked or something.
There's basically a whirlwind, like unnatural storm kicks up that's kind of whipping them around everywhere.
Okay, so this thing is giving them a hard time. They have to get out. They're able to stabilize the shuttle. As they near towards the ground, here they are able to find the Twilight Sword. It is huge. It's humongous. It looks like something that would be wielded by a giant. Now landing, they find the villainous Mordred the Evil. Okay? I don't know how evil you can get without following your name with the evil. But he's evil.
I'm sure he's earned it.
Son of Arthur Pendragon. He conjures up these, at least we assume that he conjures up these rock monsters. They all start attacking the team. And one of them actually comes up
underground.
Yeah, one of them comes up, grabs Wanda, takes her underground. And of course, that sets freaking Quicksilver off. Don't mess with his sister. Whatever you do. So Quicksilver he goes nuts. He goes up and he grabs a hold of Mordred and he's about ready to beat the crap out of him. And he says, you need to tell me where my sister is. And at that time he goes, you don't need to ask me, you need to ask her. Everybody turns around and hovering in the sky is Morgan Le Fay. Morgan Le Fay is...
And she looks like a giant, so she could probably wield that.
She's pretty big.
Although this may just be like an image of her, because it looks like she's kind of enveloped into the clouds and stuff, so maybe she's not technically there. I know when we see her later in the series, she's not a giant, so...
she's grabbing the sword, though.
Oh, let me...
So, I mean, like, at the end...
Okay, yeah, you're right. Yeah, that does happen, yeah.
That's what I didn't get. I mean, like, why does the sword have to be on top, shoved into a mountain, and she has to be that big? But whatever, I'm fine with it. Okay, I mean, it's gods. It's, again... I can't Tony Stark this and go, oh, I don't understand it. But it's gods and whatever. So at that time, Morgan Le Fay shows up. Now, she's a villain from the Thor books. I mean, folks, she's a Asgardian villainess. So as a matter of fact, she was portrayed on the latest season of Runaways.
Yeah, I've seen ads for that.
Yeah.
The lovely Elizabeth Hurley, I believe.
My goodness. She portrayed... Morgan Le Fay pretty well. So, but anyway, she looks at Captain America and she tells the other teams, she tells them that the other teams has their hands full. She goes down through like whoever the other teams that are battling other people. She mentions that this was all a distraction or all a plan. I think it might have been Mordred that said this, but anyway, this was all a plan to get Scarlet Witch there so they could use her reality warping powers and the Twilight Sword in conjunction to basically rewrite the world. Mm-hmm. And Quicksilver takes off running. Captain America stands, astonished. He can't believe what's going on. And at the end of the issue, everything fades to white.
As the characters all kind of fade away, the last couple of panels, we have the captions. Captain America's last thought as the world goes wide around him, and he with it, is that Iron Man would hate this.
I remember, I'm fairly certain that I read this trade that happens after this or with it. I imagine this includes this issue.
The first 3 issues is the first arc.
Because, I don't think I was talking to you about it. I could have been, but I went off on a tangent with either you or Evan Bevins on one of the shows, and I was like, I remember reading a trade where somebody had rewrote to where they were like in the old world. And for the life of me, I could not remember what it was. It's got to be what
the
happened.
medieval times.
Yes.
Yeah, that's this storyline.
That is because I went to issue. I looked at issue 2 and I was like, yes, this is what I remember. Iron Man, Yeoman America. And Iron, they have all these, and I think Captain America is the only person that kind of remembers, and he starts trying to gather everybody up. But anyway, so fantastic issue. I mean, I'm stopping there. What are your thoughts here, man?
I mean, I think it's great. It's one of my favorite. This Avengers run. It's not just. I mean, it's my favorite Avengers run. The Kurt Busiek era, especially the stuff with Perez. He was around probably for the first 30 issues or so, and then he moved on, and some other artists filled out the run. But the Busiek Avengers run is my favorite Avengers run, and it's one of my favorite comic runs ever. And it all kind of starts here. This first 3-issue arc is really cool, but this issue, it's an oversized issue. It's kind of supposed to be an event because it's like the heroes coming back. You feel the weight of it. It feels like to me. Mm-hmm. So I think it worked really well. And we didn't talk any about Hawkeye as we were going through. He doesn't do a whole lot in this issue, but like this is the best version of Hawkeye to me is this Avengers run. He's smarmy. He's a big mouth, mm-hmm. But he's also loyal and always gets the job done and whatnot. Like Hawkeye is easy to pick on as a goofball with a bow and arrow. but yeah, when I think of Hawkeye, I always think of this version, even though the Matt Fraction Hawkeye of more recent times is also really good and everything. But this is the Hawkeye that I always think of. Also, he becomes a member of the Thunderbolts on down the line, not too long past this. That also is a Busiek book. So yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to say, I guess, about Hawkeye. Okay. But yeah, great issue. I mean, Perez is batting 1,000 here. Every page looks great. This is probably when he was at his best, I think, is doing this Avengers run.
Like some of the panels don't need that many people in it, but you know what? He's going to put as many people in it as he can.
Yeah, if there's a flaw to him, it's that it can look a little busy sometimes, but to me, that's just more to love.
Yeah, he pulls it off so well. You can't really criticize it a whole lot because it's done with such care and looks spectacular. Boy, I would hate to draw Scarlet Witch's hair. I mean, there has to be at least
some 80s hair,
10,000 lines in those curls. Gosh, it drives me nuts. Yeah, man. I don't think I've ever. I read the trade. So I would assume that what I've read included this issue. So I must have read this before in the past. And I'm talking like, I remember having the trade in my hands like shortly after my little girl was born. So that would have been 2005.
Going back a ways.
Yeah. You have to think about where we came from and what we're doing with the issue at this point in time. You know, we went from a world without the Avengers into this pocket universe, and now we have to reintroduce them. What better way to bring them back into the Marvel universe than to get all of them together for one big story? Well planned, well thought out, and some decent storytelling. This didn't feel like it was dragging to me. Every page and every panel felt like it was necessary. If I'm picking a panel, boy, I don't want to go obvious, but my goodness, you didn't pick the one I wanted. I liked where they were all sitting waiting to get in the auditorium, I guess. So yeah, I guess the common 2-page spread where it has everybody: Spider-Man, Beast, mm-hmm. Binary, Black Widow, who looks like she'd rather not be there. So that one's pretty cool because that's one of those. Oh, I recognize that person. There's mm-hmm. She-Hulk. So I'll take that one.
Awesome.
All right, let's talk about some. I mean, we had some commentary on this one, buddy. I mean,
no surprise.
Picked a winner when it comes to reception and interaction, because we had a lot of people chime in, and a lot of that I honestly attribute to, like, you put up some pretty. I don't want to say it's controversial, but I mean, even the wiki called it controversial. So, I mean, you put up a controversial comic, and anybody who sees Liefeld's pencils on a Marvel comic, especially from the 90s, they're immediately going to have a gut reaction, I swear. Mm-hmm. Whether it be good or bad, I think that's what it is. They're just like, hey. But anyway, let's talk about some of our comments here. Top fan Top fan, get that little diamond. James Purcell, still rocking the top fan diamond. He says the problem here is that Heroes Return is emphatically the better book, or / relaunch, and helped usher in one of Marvel's greatest eras. But Heroes Reborn is probably the more interesting book to actually discuss in its context. If we would have been talking Heroes Reborn, what do you think? I mean, what would have been one of the big things that we would have definitely talked about there? Just Liefeld's takes on the characters themselves?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I didn't read that in preparation for this. I actually was going to, and I just never got around to it. But I haven't read that in a while. But I do remember that Liefeld was the writer, or at least plot writer. I believe Jeff Loeb was probably the script writer. The penciler was actually Chap Yape, or something. I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce it. But he was a guy who had done some books, I believe, for Extreme Studios, and so he was the actual artist on Avengers, but Avengers #1 had like the first half of the issue. Chap was the artist, and then Liefeld did the last second half, which is where all the action kind of took place.
Oh, that's interesting.
And I remember, loving it when I was younger. I haven't read it in a while. I'm sure it's not like it. I mean, it doesn't hold a candle to this issue, of course.
Yeah.
But like I said, it's an Image style, Avengers comic. I do remember. Obviously he changed Captain America to have the eagle on his forehead rather than the A, which people hated. I thought that was kind of cool, and I don't have a problem with that. It's like an alternate look. It's better than the U.S. agent costume. He also changed Hawkeye's costume to where it was like a tan, or it was like a brown and tan costume. It was really ugly and not well received.
Yeah.
And the Thor character had more of a sledgehammer type Mjolnir, which I thought was kind of cool.
Al Sedano of Resurrections and Adam Warlock and Thanos podcast, a good friend of ours. He says, James is right. Heroes Reborn might give you more to talk about, but damn, that Busiek and Perez run was awesome. Plus, it led to Avengers Forever, which I think we had Al on the Source Material podcast talk about that. He says, yeah, I love that. Justin Wasson, sorry if I butchered that. The idea of Lee and Liefeld returning to Marvel to bring their take on classic characters, a precursor to what would be done later in the Ultimate line, was very exciting at the time, but the product that came to be wasn't that great, which is more retrospect. Return took the characters that were, prior to Reborn, floundering a bit, and gave them a shine that matched some of their greatest moments. This issue is great, in my opinion, but I don't recall wanting to pick up, even though they did Heroes Reborn, Heroes Return, I still wasn't getting into Avengers wanting to pick those up in the 90s, in the late 90s. I was still collecting comics, but again, I think I was still stuck on the X books. I was getting Cable, I was getting X-Men, X Factor. So I was getting those books. I was reading Wizard at the time, but this comic, it sounded like, was well received. And to be honest, I was so concerned at how a book looked and how much fun I was having reading the book than I was actually paying attention to who was writing stuff. Yeah. When you say Busiek and Perez, I am immediately like, oh yeah, now. Oh, I'm down. Please sign me up.
Well, I mean, this is the book that like kind of turned me on to those guys. I don't know that I'd ever read a comic that Perez had done except for the Infinity Gauntlet. He did the first 3.5 issues of that. And I wouldn't have even thought about that. Until years later, I always associated Ron Lim as the Infinity Gauntlet artist until I realized, oh, wait, Perez did the first 3.5 issues of that. So, yeah, this is the book that kind of turned me on to both of those guys. Even though I had read Marvels in the past, I always thought of that as an Alex Ross book. That's why I read that, because of how it looked. So I wasn't really... Until around this time, late 90s, I wasn't really following specific writers. I didn't really care that much about who was writing stuff. I wasn't paying that close attention.
Yeah, I was all about the rock stars of Image, so I'd recognize those names immediately. But, I wasn't paying attention to who was writing books. I was like, oh, well, hey, that's Eric Larson's character. That's Rob Liefeld's character. Or that was once Rob Liefeld's book. So I wasn't. And in the 90s, I could tell you artists way easier than I could tell you who was a writer, because that tracks.
That makes sense for teenagers. That's that's what comic books are. That's what's drawing people to comic books is the art. And the test is always kind of like, what's more important to you in a comic, the writing or the art? And it's like, well, good art can save bad writing, but good writing can't save bad art. Like, if the art is really bad or I'm not really feeling it, it's going to be hard for me to get invested.
So James Purcell chimes back in. He says, in my opinion, New Universe, 2099, Reborn, and Ultimate are all variations on the same idea. How do we take old ideas / formulas and make them fresh and new for a new audience? And every single time they go out with a whimper, because inevitably the new becomes the old. You got any thoughts on that?
I mean, he's right. I think, Ultimates is a great example. The Ultimate Universe, it was amazing in the early days. I loved the early Ultimate Spider-Man. I loved the early Ultimate X-Men, Ultimate Fantastic Four. Those were really cool books. They were of their time. Like, they felt, they were late 90s, early 2000s. I guess early 2000s, more like. If you go back and look at them now, they read kind of like that. But especially at the time they were coming out, they were amazing. And within a few short years, they started to kind of collapse on themselves. And I think part of that, especially with the Ultimates, is they stopped using top-of-the-line creators. I think that was one problem. And then once the sales started to decline, they did Ultimatum, which was really badly, which is awful. I mean, it just, as far as I believe it was awful anyway. I'm sure that has its fans. Then that whole thing just kind of collapsed on itself, and they eventually folded some of the characters that they liked into the main MCU. But yeah, it's true. Like, it's hard to create a reboot version of these characters and have it work.
Yeah, of those that he listed, the Ultimate line was probably the longest lived line. And it was still, just like you said, it was tough to maintain, and sure enough, it folded. It took a long time.
Yeah, it was around for, Ultimate Spider-Man went over 100 issues.
Yeah, and we got some great characters. When you look at Miles Morales' Spider-Man, he's sticking around. So it's I think you can find every once in a while a diamond in the rough. You can find something in there that kind of sticks, and it's still a neat take on it. But, it's really tough to do. It really is, because these characters have been around so long. They got such a legacy, and you've got to try and take something and turn it on its ear or do something new with it. And I'm sure there's probably some titles out there that may have done things like that and kept it around, but obviously off the top of my head, I can't think of it. So anyway, back to it. Patrick Mullen, our good buddy from the Rattlich and Broadcasting Network, totally 80s Pat, said he's not a huge fan of either, and that doesn't surprise me. But he says he's not a huge fan of either, but at least Return got things back to semi-normal. Pat Mullen liking a Liefeld book would probably take at least $1 million. There's no way I could convince him. Michael Howie, most people want to forget Heroes Reborn. Now, I know this created some conversation, because I think you may have chimed in and said, well, maybe you want to forget it, which, yeah, it's not that. I mean, I don't want to. I think Michael Howie, he obviously feels a certain way about the book.
Obviously.
Obviously he does. So, but it took, Marvel probably at the time saw Image's success and said, well, you guys are printing money over there. Yeah. How about you print some money over here? I mean, you guys, you got a little bit of a following, and you can't discount Marvel trying to go. I would have done it.
Right. Yeah. It was a good idea. I mean, and the sales bore that out. Now, it didn't work out in the long run, but yeah, it was a gamble that paid off, at least temporarily. And also, like, it paid off in that once the Heroes Return books launched, those were big hits. So.
Rafe Mahadeo, I'm sure I mispronounced that. He says, I like the second half of the Avengers Reborn run when Walt Simonson took over, great writer, and told a great story with Loki feeling like a legitimate threat, which, yeah, he says, never read the Liefeld issues, no interest in doing so. Okay, I understand. Michael Howie steps back in. He says, fair point. I don't know if he's replying to you or if he's replying to Refe. But anyway, he says the James Robinson cap was pretty good too. FF looked good, but read bad. Iron Man was blah. I really wanted to jump into the Fantastic Four books because that Jim Lee, I wanted to see him all over Fantastic Four.
I definitely want to go back and read the issues at least that he penciled. I had, those early issues. I don't know how many I still have. And I'm not sure how many issues I think he did the first 6, but I'm not certain.
Okay.
But there was, Doom was in those issues. Namor was in those issues. There was a lot of just a chance to see him draw those characters is kind of cool.
Mm-hmm. So FF looked good, but read bad. Iron Man was blah. The 2 4-parters at the end made no sense. So
those ones we discussed earlier, I think.
Okay. The Galactus one and the World War III.
Yeah.
Okay. It destroyed one of the best Cap runs to that date. The best thing about it was the relaunch afterwards, and the Thunderbolts, I suppose, which, again, I haven't read any of those yet. And I know so many people, including you, are just like, dude, you need to read Thunderbolts.
Yeah, I've just recently finished reading the Busiek Thunderbolts run. I think he did up issue like 34. And I've decided to keep reading because Fabian Nizia, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, took over as the writer at that point, but Bagley was still doing the art. So I'm probably just going to go ahead and read the rest of that whole run. But yeah, Thunderbolts is really good, great concept, really well executed. It's a really, really cool book. And eventually we're going to have to throw a Thunderbolts issue onto a poll somewhere.
Gotta happen. So did you know anything about the Cap run up to this point? I mean...
I wasn't reading it, but I remember there was a lot of hubbub about, Cap is already getting back on track. This Mark Waid, Ron Garney runs really good. Why are they messing it up, and et cetera. And I went back and read, I got a trade of the, I think, one story arc they did before it got rebooted, a few years later. And it was good, but I was like, it's not as good as they were making it out to be. It is pretty good, though. And then they were the creative team that they tapped for the Hero's Return Captain America book.
Okay.
So they were like, hey, just get back in here and do what you were doing before. And it was pretty good. I'm a big fan of Ron Garney and Mark Waid, to be honest. So Garney was only on that book for like the first 5 issues, maybe. And then I think Andy Cooper took over.
Okay.
And Waid eventually left that book under protest because of an issue. So it was kind of troublesome even when they brought it back. But that run wasn't bad. But yeah, people were pissed about Captain America getting rebooted with Liefeld whenever, they were a lot of fans to what was going on already.
Liefeld, I don't think had that much flack at that. I mean, he wasn't getting that much of a... He wasn't
hated as much.
Yeah, at that point,
and not to the level he would become hated in the late 90s into the 2000s. And I'm not sure exactly why people became so vocal later on. Maybe it's because of the internet. Maybe because the internet wasn't as big a deal before. That's why you didn't hear it as much.
I don't know how you could think the internet would cause problems.
Yeah, that's true. I'm misguided here. So, Liefeld got in some hot water in the late 90s for... he got kicked out of Image, essentially.
Yeah.
They were accusing him of trying to steal artists from other studios and stuff, which was probably true. I mean, I guess you've seen the Image Revolution movie.
Yep.
And they talk about it on there. So, that could have had something to do with, his popularity dropping and people starting to hate him even more and stuff. I don't know. But I like the way he draws people. So I remember reading the stuff in Wizard when they were covering that stuff. And I remember a quote from Todd McFarlane. After they basically voted Liefeld out, and the quote was like, I will quit Image. I will quit comics entirely before we let Rob Liefeld back into the Image. And I mean, for a long time that was the case. He didn't come back for a long time.
Rafe steps back in. He says, I read one of the FFs. Jim Lee art was so beautiful. Story was serviceable, but nothing amazing. The FF get wrecked by Terrax. I remember that issue. That was pretty well the extent of it. So Cole Marantat, who a good friend of ours from the Rattleitcher Broadcasting Network, his comment was basically anything greater than Heroes Reborn. Dave Whitaker steps in and says, why not both? And Dave, I hear you, buddy. All right, man. I think that's it. I mean, we picked our panels. We talked about our final thoughts on the book. Anything else you want to say before we close up shop?
No, I think that's pretty much it. We'll say, when we started doing this podcast, there were some things I definitely wanted to hit. Ultraverse, we did that in the first episode. Darkhawk. And this Avengers run is right up there with those. This is something that I really wanted to get on here and talk about because I love it so much. So thanks for giving me the opportunity. I did mention this on the Avengers Forever pod we did on Source Material, but like Perez's Busiek's writing style kind of fluctuates depending on what kind of book he's doing. But this one especially it's got a real like Bronze Age Avengers like feel to it. It kind of feels like he was writing it in the style of the comics he was reading, when he was younger. Mm-hmm. So it can feel a little dated in some ways, but I think it works really well.
All right, man. Well, let's get into plugs, sir. What do you got going on?
But we're recording this, on the heels of COVID-19. Earlier this week, the NBA shut down and whatnot. So probably going to have plenty of time to sit around the house and read comics in the near future. So that's what I'm going to have going on. But you can follow me on Twitter at BrodyMan34. And you can hear me on Jesse's other podcast on occasion as well. And I've got a few things up on the UnspokenDecade.com under JC Armstrong. It's a 90s comics fan site. You guys should be familiar with it by now.
That's right. Got to go over there, check out the UnspokenDecade.com. I bet you type in Avengers or you type in Captain America, you type in Liefeld, you type in Busiek. You're going to find articles pertaining to those subjects. So don't hesitate going over there. And if you got some time on your hands, read a little something there from the UnspokenDecade.com. And, of course, folks, if you want to get in on the voting on our next poll that we put up, check out the Unspoken Decade Facebook page. Me and Chris usually throw something up there. We try to keep it pretty regular, but we'd love to see what we throw up 2 issues, let it battle them out, see what you can do, vote, get your voice heard, and feel free to comment and let us know what you think. If you enjoy the podcast, do not hesitate to share. We'd love to get some additional listeners. So if you know somebody that likes to hear a discussion on 90s comics, by all means, let them know we're out there. And special thanks to W2Mnet.com for hosting the podcast. And also, if you guys want to check out W2M Network, you can subscribe. You'll get anytime an Unspoken Issues episode hits, you'll get it right in there. There's all sorts of other great podcasts out there as well. So you can follow me at Stiznarky on Twitter if you do so wish. And I think that is going to do it for Chris Armstrong. I am Jesse Starcher. Have a good one. Bye-bye.